Welcome to today's webinar, Student Transport and COVID-19, Meeting the Challenge of a Modern Pandemic, presented by Synovia Solutions. I'm Josh DeLucia with School Bus Fleet Magazine, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. I encourage you to ask questions during the webinar at any point, and we will try to address them all. However, if we do not get to yours, don't worry, you'll be contacted by email with a response after the event. Our presenters for today are Brian Mitchell, who's in charge of the K-12 and Government Solution Brand and Marketing with Synovia Solutions, Kane M. Smith, who is Director of Transportation with Cypress Fairbanks ISD, Michelle Mundingo, the Interim Assistant Director of Transportation with North Kitsap School District, Samuel Kim, the Senior Administrative Analyst with the Los Angeles Unified School District Transportation Services Division, and Lisa Beck, the Executive Director of Transportation with Minneapolis Public Schools. Now, I'll hand it over to Brian.
Josh, thank you very much. Participants across the country who have logged in to participate in this webinar, thank you very much. And to our distinguished guests who have donated a lot of their very valuable time to share their knowledge, thank you very much. Obviously an incredibly challenging time that we're in as it relates to back to school. I think everyone's been, deep in this essentially since March, and it's only become more intense as we've gone, as the calendar has flipped and we're now in August and children are officially heading back to school. This webinar is going to be about an hour long, and it's meant to essentially share the knowledge of some of the best professionals in the industry, some that we work with and some that we don't at Synovia. We wanted to bring a smart roundtable that could share a lot of their knowledge. And hopefully, if you take one nugget out of this that makes you better at your job, then it's time well spent. So with that in mind, we'll kind of get started. This is a picture I took last summer, which now seems like decades ago, when there was no social distancing and there was no masks and there was no hygiene and there was no and, right? But I use this in almost all of the presentations that I do because I think it reminds me, at least, and I hope it does to you as well, of the commitment that all of us have to this group right here, right? First and foremost, the children, and then secondarily, their parents. And we took this in Cobb County, Georgia, where one of our customers was using Here Comes the Bus to support their summer school operations. And it's really a reflection of, the expectation that parents have nowadays, right? We all know how connected everybody is, but it's just a fresh reminder, and especially right now, kind of a poignant reminder of life before the pandemic, of the connected family and what they expect from their school bus fleet and from essentially all parts of society. Okay, so why are we sponsoring this today? We have a commitment at Synovia to student safety. We've been in this business for a very long time. A lot of you hopefully know us. And we're trying to share our stories. So this is very much an opportunity for us to be top of mind when it comes to student safety. Pretty proud individually that through the fruit of our effort and some of our new products, we've actually been featured on Good Morning America earlier this week for our new Bus Guardian product that you'll hear a little bit about during this presentation, but not much, as it's mainly me focused on the work of this panel. Brian Mitchell, that's me. You see my smiling face there in a professional day when I had good, clean haircuts on a regular basis. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, proudly, with some service overseas. Been 2 years at Synovia in Calais. The story I try to tell here day to day is why the school bus is like the airline industry. And what I mean by that is we're focused on safety first and then on-time arrivals. And that's just like the airline industry. I spent 5 years working in the aviation industry, and I see a ton of parallels there. And that's the story I'm trying to share in terms of the technology we sell and how it impacts the end user, how it helps them both be more safe and facilitate on-time arrivals, which are so important in the K-12 space. So that's who we are. That's who I am. And I think importantly about me, my son is a sophomore at Fort Wayne Northrop High School, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and he starts tomorrow. So this is not an academic exercise. He's going into the classroom tomorrow. And I can hear the tension in his voice every time we speak over the last several days, as you know, all of this goes from this kind of suspended animation we've been living in for many months back to the real world. So I'm very invested in student safety because I have a student who I also want to remain very safe. Synovia, who are we? We are a subsidiary of CalAmp. Synovia has been around for 19 years when GPS technology was still essentially like magic before we all had these smartphones in our pockets that made all this mapping technology so ubiquitous. We were delivering to school buses to, again, make them safer. CalAmp has been around for 38 years, based out of Southern California, and their technology is in over 10 million vehicles worldwide. Here Comes the Bus is probably our signature product at Synovia. A lot of you have seen it around. It basically is the rideshare experience for the school bus, launched in 2015 as a lark, seeing if we could pull this thing off. We had 5 school districts here in the Midwest that helped us test it out, and it took off like crazy. Today it's got 2.1 million users, and it maintains a 4.6 star rating on the App Store. So it's pretty popular. A lot of people like it because of the convenience and safety element that it adds. And our newest product, again, is Bus Guardian, which we'll talk a little bit about, but at a high level, it's contact tracing and hygiene verification for the school bus. And that's the story that we shared just this week on Good Morning America. Okay, so we're about to get into the panel. This is what you all came for. That's enough about Synovia and me and our background. Our panel comes from all across the country. You'll see their beautiful logos there, from Washington State to Minnesota, Georgia, Southern California, and the great state of Texas. While they're diverse in their region and in the size of their fleet and the way they're going to school, I think we all have one singular focus, which is that student at the desk there, right? That's getting each and every student to school safely in this new world that we live in. So while the experts bring a lot of different perspectives and will share a lot of different ideas, I think we all go to work every day thinking about that student and how do we get her and him to school safely. Okay, so we're just a few minutes in. I'm not eating up too much of your time with all the introductory stuff. We're going to get into the meat of the matter here, what everyone joined us for. So this is exciting. It's exciting to me because these are questions we've been asking ourselves at Synovia, talking to our customers and trying to figure out if we have technology solutions that can help solve these problems. So what we did is we took these questions and we presented them to this panel and said, can you help us talk about how you're answering these questions internally? So with that in mind, what we're going to do is give each of our panelists essentially 3 to 5 minutes to introduce themselves, speak about what's going on in their school district, their community, their region of the country, and especially as it relates to student transportation. And then we're going to come back to these questions. That does not mean that the participants logged in should not ask questions. If you have a question that isn't on this list and you think someone on this panel can answer it, by all means, please, we very much want this to be collaborative and open-ended. I've done all the promoting I'm going to do of Synovia. This is really going to be a question and answer session for the next 50 minutes. So we have a lot of time to get really smart and share some best practices. So I thank you all again. We're going to now kind of get into the meat of the matter and introduce our experts. And first on that list is Lisa. So I'm going to turn to Lisa to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lisa Beck, and I'm the Executive Director of Transportation for the Minneapolis Public School System. You can see on the slide, we have about 34,000 students, and we transport about 19,500 of those. Our superintendent, under our governor's guidance, has opted kind of for a phasing type approach. So it will change as we go along. But right now, we will begin the beginning of the school year as distance learning, but providing student support in the areas of technical mental health supports. As we move forward, they will be coming into school for those supports. And then at that point, based on the numbers here in the here in the metro area, we'll rotate to a hybrid and hopefully to full on. So right now, we really don't have a timeline for the time that we'll be back in full rotation, but we're going to start at distance learning. We're looking at our fleet. As far as bus capacity, we are certainly following the state guidelines, which are nice and vague. We will be somewhere between, 30% and 50% realistically. So on a 77 person bus at 50%, 36 or 37. If we calculated one per seat, you're at 26 and providing a little more distance. As many of you, they'll be following new procedural for loading, load to the back and the front, and then for unloading, front to back. They will be wearing face masks and using hand sanitizer. In between each run, we've ordered up some wireless electrostatic sprayers so that we can sanitize our buses in between each run, so to minimize the risk from school to school. And then in terms of contact tracing, we're working with Synovia. We already have Here Comes the Bus. And so we're working with them to get the backside of the data that if we need to contract trace, we can. The other part of the product that we're using is when you have hundreds of drivers checking in, we don't want them centrally located. So we're going to be using Synovia for the check-in of aides, bus drivers, as well as tracking the students. I think the good opportunity of distance learning is it gives us an opportunity. We'll be rotating all of our staff in over the next month or two to bring them up to speed on all these procedures. We have new cleaning procedures. We have new loading procedures. We have requirements, not to mention the normal trainings that we like to involve them in. But because they are very tense and nervous themselves, we feel that we're very fortunate that we will get to rotate them in and be able to provide that training to them. And with that, I will turn it over to the next speaker.
Lisa, thank you very much. It's a great introduction. And thank you for the minor plug of Synovia there. We're pleased to know that some of the distance learning and distance with drivers clocking in is going to help you. It's interesting, as we develop these products, we started the ability for drivers to do login on their phone a year ago, and we're able to launch it 6 weeks ago. It takes that much back-end software engineering, testing, rework, and so on. So it's interesting. You start these things just trying to improve the product, and then these global events happen, and all of a sudden it's got a whole new urgency. So we're pleased to hear, because in our initial conversation, I didn't remember you saying that, so that's great. And again, thank you, Lisa, for joining us. Trey Studstill was scheduled to be our next speaker yesterday afternoon. I got a message from him that he's not going to be able to join us because his school year started last week, and he was going to be the lone speaker who was going to be able to talk about what they're actually doing. I'm going to speak real briefly, not on behalf of Trey, but just share what Trey spoke to me. I would not certainly try to speak on behalf of a customer. So just to be clear, we had a bit of a preparatory session, and Trey shared some of the numbers that you see down there below, that they're doing a hybrid model. And they've got a pretty nice sized virtual academy, essentially distance learning. And they've seen ridership numbers drop significantly, but they're still facing a lot of those staffing issues that were, I think, obviously prevalent throughout the industry prior to COVID, and I can only imagine have been made more acute by COVID. So I think I know we missed Trey, and I was really looking forward to hearing his voice from having been, in an active school year. It would have been about a week solid when this presentation began, but they actually had COVID-related incidents happen in his school that were on social media and traditional media that's caused some issues. So I think it's just one more thing that we'll need to think about as you go forward. He had planned to spend an hour and a half with us and share his knowledge, which is not insignificant, and he was unable because of COVID and because his school opened and things got really crazy really quick. So Trey's a Synovia customer. He's a great guy. If you meet him at a conference, hope you get a chance to speak to him. I thank him because he spent a nice amount of time preparing for this, and we wish him well for everything in his school, which is open down there in suburban Atlanta. With that being said, I'll turn over to Kane outside of Houston.
Well, good afternoon and good morning to our friends on the West Coast. My name is Kane Smith. I'm the Director of Transportation for the Cypress Fairbanks Independent School District. We're on the northwest side of Houston. And we're a pretty fast growth district. We're at about 118,500 students going into this school year. And we're unique because we do allow for transportation for every student in the district regardless of where that child lives. So we transport 72% of our student body, which is about 85,000 students daily. Now, of course, this was pre-COVID, and as we're starting to see some numbers come in, that is, of course, changing. We operate about 1,150 buses, and we have about 1,300 employees in our department that are spread over 5 different transportation centers across the district. Our COVID plan, kind of like Lisa alluded to, we're focusing on what the state is telling us, and it is vague in some areas and not so vague in others. Without getting into the complexities of the details of the plan here in Texas, we are required to offer on-site instruction for students throughout the school year for us to maintain funding. And so we are looking at doing a virtual and in-person instructional model when school starts September 8th. Our original first day was supposed to be August 24th, but we have pushed that back to give us a little bit more time to get ready. We are looking at about a 50-50 split between virtual and in-person. We had a questionnaire that went out about 2 weeks ago, and it afforded the parents the opportunity to make the selection of what we call our CFISD Connect, which is our virtual platform for instruction, or to do the traditional face-to-face in on-site instruction. And when we say we have about a 50-50 split, when you start looking at the numbers, you realize that 50-50 split is not consistent when you start looking at individual campuses. We have 91 campuses in the district, and in some cases you may see 20% on-site, 80% virtual, and in other cases you see 80% on-site and 20% virtual. So now that we got those numbers, we are starting to look at routing, and because of our size, we actually started our routing process really back in the spring to get ready for this school year. And you know, I guess a lot of us have had to be patient through all of this and have had to have flexibility. And the term I've never like to use, but we have to use it in this time, is guesstimating. We have to guesstimate how many students we will anticipate returning. So we completed routing for anticipating about 70% of our students returning to face-to-face, and routing all 70% of those students, which comes to about 60,000 riders. And when we started seeing the numbers coming in, we see our numbers drastically lower than what we even anticipated. And you know, one of the things I've said from the very beginning is we want to overestimate, especially to allow for more physical distancing and be better prepared for the outcome of, you know, students returning and how many of those students would be returning. So we're looking at about 26,000 right now, with still 26,000 students registered to ride the bus, with still about 15% non-respondent at this time. So we're anticipating about 30,000 students that will be riding our buses, which will allow us to maintain physical distancing on the bus. One of the things that we made sure to do also was contact our drivers weekly. Our last day for face-to-face instruction was March 6th. And every week since then, our supervisors have contacted every single one of our employees every week, and just to check on them, just to make sure they're doing all right, just to keep them informed as to what was going on, keep them engaged in the process. And I feel that has helped us, because we have not seen a large number of employees resign at this point. We are still, I mean, obviously we're everybody's short drivers for the most part, but in response to the pandemic, we have not seen a large number of employees resign to this day. So we're comfortable right now with our staffing models, which is making me feel better, especially since we've had route selection starting this week, and the majority of our drivers have shown up to select a route. And going into some specifics as to some of the plans that we've put in place this year, we have never had students actually register to ride the bus. We have pretty much put the route information on the website and have allowed students, pretty much every student who's registered or eligible to ride has been able to get on a school bus. So this year we're actually starting to register students to ride, which A, allows us better efficiency and effectiveness on our routing for this year, and B, allows us to have a better grasp on contact tracing in the event that we may have a student or a staff member who is exhibiting symptoms or test positive for COVID-19. We're also requiring all students and staff to wear a face mask while riding the school bus and while on campus and while in the buildings. Students who come to the bus in the morning without a face mask will obviously not be refused to ride to school, but we will have additional face masks available on the bus for the driver to provide to the student. We are going to provide hand sanitizing stations on the vehicles for the students and the staff when they board the bus and when they exit the bus. And when feasible and when weather is permitting, windows will be open, roof vents will be open to allow for additional airflow and ventilation throughout the buses. Our drivers will be disinfecting the vehicles when time permits after every run. You know, obviously we have some runs that as soon as we drop off a group of students at a school, we're having to go to the next school. At a minimum, we're going to be wiping down the high-touch areas, the rails, areas around the door. But, you know, to the extent feasible, we will be disinfecting the buses after every run. And we have also purchased electrostatic foggers where we will be fogging and disinfecting every bus that is transporting students after every run. So that's some of the plans that we have in place right now. Of course, it is a fluid situation. One of the things that I've told all of my staff is to be patient and be prepared. The only constant through all of this right now has been change, it seems like. So, you know, we just preach flexibility and patience as we move forward through this together.
Kane, thank you for that. Listening to you speak, a couple of themes emerged. The first, I think, was the idea of communicating with your drivers as diligently and thoughtfully as you have throughout this entire process to keep them engaged. One could only imagine, and I think a lot of us might have felt this in these remote distance workspaces we've been in, that you can become a bit disconnected from your colleagues and employer and so on. And simple things like that can certainly go a long way. I know they have in my career with my colleagues. And then on the communication front, Kane, I heard you say physical distancing and not social distancing. For those of you who've kind of been paying attention to some of the semantics of the language, there is a difference, and it's interesting to hear how districts are using that. The idea of physical distancing truly being people and their bodies staying close, and social distancing, you know, is more of the idea of staying away from people necessarily. And we want to stay connected socially. Hence, I, you know, think about the phone calls that he's making and then the district is making. But then as well, you know, staying physically distant. So I think it's interesting, the communication tactics that you're using, Kane. You guys saw in my introduction, I'm an Oklahoma Sooner proudly, but I have to give big props to the people down there in Texas. It sounds like they're really organized, diligent, and doing all the best they can to take care of the students. So that being said, we're going to move on next to Samuel Kim. Samuel's from Los Angeles. Please excuse the placeholder numbers there. He sent them to me, and in my haste yesterday of my final preparations, I did not do it. So, you know, the best laid plans, ... As it were, Sam, we're looking forward to hearing what's going on in Los Angeles. Certainly a bellwether for not just the school bus industry, but all of America in so many ways.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, so my name is Samuel Kim, and I am the Senior Admin Analyst, and I am the main program manager for our GPS project with Synovia, and I help to manage the GPS data and information for our fleet for the transportation department. Currently, right now, we have 673,000 students in the district, and out of those students, we are transporting 36,000 riders as of last March, when we actually stopped, when COVID hit and we shut down the schools physically. And out of those 36,000 riders, we have about 11,000 special ed, and the 25,000 being the other students like magnet programs and so on and so forth. So we do not transport a majority of our students, unfortunately. We have a fleet of 1,300 buses, and we have 1,500 routes. And the way we're able to do that is we have 600 contracted routes that we do with 2 different vendors, and they're primarily transporting many of our special ed students. So we are scheduled to start school on August 20th, so next Thursday is when we're going to have the first day of school. And we originally started thinking of planning to have a hybrid learning, and we were having all that ready to go. And then when the California's number of COVID cases went up, as some of you might have heard, the governor basically said no, there was going to be no schools opening up, so we had to pivot very quickly, and we are going to be all virtual only. And so with that, how it affected us is we were getting ready to route how we were going to route those students. We were just getting ready for those numbers. So we now are in a situation where, we're looking like maybe January is when we're going to possibly have, hybrid learning where some of the kids will be able to come back to school and some of them will stay with an online. And so when that happens, we are planning to have limiting 12 students a bus. And that is a flexible number that we're still trying to figure out, but we're awaiting, finalized numbers of when we're going to start up school again, having the schools physically open to receive students, and then we're going to have to start to route at that time. But for right now, we're planning to do 12 students per bus. Now, with the contact tracing, since we're in a kind of a unique situation where we don't bus all of our students ourselves and we're using contracted, buses, we still want to have the ability to be able to have contact tracing where we can, within a short time, we could find out which, students were on which bus if there was any like COVID-related incidents that occur. So one of the ways that we're really looking into is to create, it's basically going to be a very manual process where we will create a database where the supervisors for each of the areas will have to daily input the students that rode in the areas in their buses. And so we're currently putting that database together right now, putting together the specifications so that by January, when we have the routes up and running somewhat, we'll be able to capture that on a daily basis. And not only that, to be able to pull that information very quickly. Fortunately, we have many of since we have approximately 900 routes that are running by the district, we have Synovia's MDTs that were installed last November, and we'd already started a pilot program to do the bus passes with the QR codes, and we successfully implemented a pilot before the COVID struck, and so we're pretty confident that when we go back live that we're going to be opening up to all our district buses, and we have plans to integrate that into the database that we're trying to create so that that only the contracted routes are the only ones that we can have to manually enter that data. In regards to the sanitation, similarly, we're doing the trainings right now with our EMIST, like the fogging machines, and we haven't really figured out the procedures yet, but that's still in the process but for now, I was told that we're going to be doing that daily at the very minimum, and so and that's pretty much it. And we're just trying to be very flexible. Plans are changing like daily, and so transportation has just kind of been on standby and trying to provide as much support as we can in any way while we're waiting for the schools to open up again.
Samuel, thank you. What struck me of what you said there, did I hear you correct that roughly 1/3 of your student riders are special needs?
Well, 11,000 of them are special needs, and then 25,000 are not special needs. So yeah.
Okay, so a pretty good percentage are special needs, and I imagine they'll require quite a bit of special accommodations as it relates to COVID when they return to the classroom. It's interesting. We ran a survey as part of the launch of Bus Guardian, and we got about 1,000 parents nationwide off of our Facebook page to respond, and we found that 29% of the parents who responded said their children are special needs. Before I joined this industry, if you'd asked me how many students attend school are special needs, I would think 2, 3, 4%. It couldn't be a huge number. So I'm always interested when I have these opportunities to listen and learn that a lot of these districts have a fairly significant number of special needs students, which as it relates to this COVID situation, obviously will present a whole raft of challenges above and beyond what we normally deal with. That's an interesting number that you shared, Samuel. Next,
so even though only a correct. So even though only 1/3 of our students are special needs, 65% of our routes are predominantly special needs. So yeah, special needs is a huge portion of our operations.
Wow, and it's got to be quite time-consuming and very cumbersome to meet those specifications, but you have to do it. Take care of the kids. Excellent, Samuel. Thank you very much. Moving on to Michelle, coming to us from the great state, if my slide will react, thank you, the great state of Washington. Michelle, thanks for joining us. Can you please introduce yourself?
Good morning. My name is Michelle Mundingo. I'm the Interim Assistant Director of Transportation here at North Kitsap. We are a ferry ride directly across from Seattle, in case you're wondering where Kitsap County is. In this county, we have 6 districts. So that makes us pretty small with 6,000 students, busing about 5,800 of those. Of those riders, we have only about 1,000, here comes the bus parents, but those people feel very strongly about that, and it's been a really good resource to them. We've had to be very fluid here. It's changed daily. We started working on routing and how to create social distancing on a bus in April. We've been working on it steadily, all to find out that about 2 weeks ago we went completely remote, and we will start the school year out with full distance learning. Up until that point, we had several models because we had such a significant shortage of drivers due to retirement. We have a lot of drivers that have been here as long as 40 years, and they were just retiring. So we needed to figure out how we were going to get all of these kids to school, and we started with 25 on a bus with multiple legs in every route. It was the only way we were going to be able to get them there, but that was going to take a lot of resources, a lot of time, and we went to a 3-tiered system instead of the current two-tiered system. That wasn't popular, but with our driver shortage, it was the only way we were going to get them to school and then get them home. We were going to be sitting in alternate seats, designated seats. We were going to designate seats with colors. We had a lot of different scenarios to present up until they shut us down. So the three-tiered system was going to be our best option here. At that time, our parents had an option to do hybrid or full distance learning. The hybrid would be A days, which would have been Monday and Tuesday, and B days on Thursday and Friday. We were going to use Wednesdays as what we called a deep clean day, and that was for the schools and all of the facilities that had students and employees inside of it. We also had, we ordered the electrostatic foggers. On every bus, we were going to have an electrostatic fogger. That was the plan. There would never be a student placed behind the driver, and the fogger would be secured in the seat behind, and our district was requiring that after every route, every leg of a route, the bus would be fogged. So we really didn't have a great plan for being efficient. We were just trying to get them to school. We actually asked that all of our drivers just automatically receive 40 hours a week with all of this extra time built into every route for all of the cleaning and sanitizing. We did not have a plan in place yet for the contact tracing. We never got to that part of the conversation. We had not gotten to the conversation of having any technology upgrades, but my director and I both felt like we could benefit from having the student check-in, just in the event that if a student did get sick, by the time a driver could get back and watch a video so we could identify who was where, we could already have them checked in through the tablet. We were certainly talking about that a lot. The budget, I think our budget was really, we kind of just had to throw that out the window as far as how to get kids to school due to our shortage of drivers. And as far as training, our district, our state actually mandated that once you're inside of the cab while you're training or testing a driver, you had to either wear a mask and a face shield or a mask and goggles and gloves at all times. So I have several behind-the-wheel trainers, and we were going to split up a class so that nobody was with more than 2 people at a time. That was our hope, but unfortunately our class was canceled the day before it started. And we're now at the place where we're just continuing with the conversations that we were having when they shut us down, so that we are ready to go as soon as they say that we are going to go. That will be evaluated in November to see if we can start in January for face-to-face learning. My director and I have called all of our people every week, and that has been very helpful. We've not had anyone say they are not coming back. They're all very eager to come back and just do whatever they need to do, whatever we ask them to do. We're very fortunate with these drivers and our paras. We've been very fortunate with that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Michelle. It's a great introduction. So as a reminder, we've got representatives who are going to answer questions now. We've had some brief introductions from each. We've got representatives from Texas, from Minnesota, from California, and from Washington State. So areas that, to a large degree, have all been pretty heavily impacted by this pandemic situation. And I think are going to be able to offer a lot of great expertise from very large school districts to medium-sized school districts to smaller school districts. So whatever your needs are out there as a listener. I'd like to start now. Michelle, you said something that was interesting to me, and I hope a lot of you are seeing it as well. You know, we started with some of these mask mandates that is certainly now in place. First it was for the county I lived in. Now it's the entire state of Indiana. I'm going to start first with Lisa and talk a little bit about how you're approaching. I know Kane said they have a mask mandate. What is your situation around masks, and are you doing the face covers? The last webinar we had, a school bus contractor in Pennsylvania was mandating all the drivers wear the clear face shields. Lisa, can you talk about what your position is with your district as relates to masks, face shields, and so on?
Sure, happy to. Well, the state of Minnesota is under a mandate. The city of Minneapolis has been under a face mask mandate for quite some time. So it has been required. We, for the most part, use the cloth mask covering and save the N95 mask for our healthcare workers in our school system. And so we will be continuing to require that of everyone. Students, obviously, if there is a or employees for that matter, if there is a medical reason that you cannot wear the mask, you have to go through a process to get that waived. And similar as one of the speakers, we will have masks on the bus so that if the student tries to get on the bus without a mask, we would obviously encourage them to wear one, and only if they had a medical reason would not.
I know it's a difficult question, Lisa, but I have to ask. Will students, if they refuse to wear a mask, will they be able to board the bus?
They will be allowed to ride the bus simply because we can't send them back to their homes because we don't know that that's safe. We will try to, pull them away from as many folks as we can on the bus and have them deal with it at the school site. It's just the practical idea of on a street corner, what's realistic for us to ask a bus driver to do.
No, absolutely. We've asked a lot of the essential workers of our society to police some of these behaviors,
exactly,
for better or worse. And it's a difficult position to put a bus driver in, that's for sure. The face shields, I never wore one. I am interested. Do we think, Lisa, is that going to be an option for your drivers? Is it better than the mask? Is it more breathable?
I think it's debatable and a personal choice. We ended up doing the face covering simply because we could not order or get any other type of mask. So we had to start taking volunteer, homemade masks when we were in the middle of the crisis of distributing computers to all of our students. Now there is a surplus of items that have been purchased by the state that include all types of masks, from cloth coverings all the way to the clear shields. My assumption at this point is the clear shields will be used in the classroom more than by bus drivers, but we anticipate that arriving here shortly, and we'll figure out who's going to wear what.
Excellent. Kane, I want to go to you with the next question as it relates to PPE. I know we spoke initially, you talked about a mask mandate. I think about Houston, where I've been a handful of times, and that heat and humidity is really intense. I guess my question is twofold. A, will you keep windows open and turn off AC? And if so, with that heat, are you allowing drivers to substitute masks for shields, or is your position evolving? Where does Houston and Cypress especially fall on this matter right now?
Well, and today's 99 degrees with a heat index of 107 and humidity of 100%. So another, lovely typical early August day in Houston. When we talk weather permitting, we also have to talk about heat. And that's one of the things that we're still discussing is what's that threshold before we do say, okay, we may need to consider running buses with the AC with the windows up. Because, like I said, there is that threshold of just oppressive heat that we do deal with down here, along with the high humidity. So when we talk about face coverings, I spoke to some drivers this morning, and they were asking me about, I feel more comfortable wearing a face shield. And, for us, as long as you have some form of protective covering over your face, whether it be in a mask or a shield, it's going to be acceptable for us. The one thing that we stress to our drivers is that I need you to feel comfortable with what you have on while you're operating that bus, and I need to make sure that you have clear line of sight and clear vision while you're driving that bus. And I have seen some face shields that some drivers have come in wearing that fit on, they have like goggles, or they have kind of like the eyeglasses that, actually sit on your nose. And they are anti-glare, and they work very well while driving. So I've told the drivers, as long as you have some form of face covering on, whether it be in a mask or a shield, and like I said, as long as it's not inhibiting your ability to effectively operate that bus, then that will be acceptable.
Excellent. That's a good answer, and I can only imagine what's the challenge of operating the vehicle with all the pressure of COVID and that heat and humidity. And it's I don't think it'll be much better in a few weeks, September in South Texas. So it's interesting to see how you guys are evolving. Michelle, the next question over to you guys. Boarding and deboarding the bus. This was one that I thought was interesting because, again, I come from a background in aviation, and I think if you've traveled, you might have seen other parts of the world, they'll deboard the plane from the rear concurrently to the front, and it seems like this crazy efficient newfound thing that happens when you're in different countries. And then I've heard buses are doing the same. Are you guys looking at that, Michelle, as a way to further promote and execute the physical distancing?
We had, that was one of our plans. We really felt we would go with board from the back of the bus to the front, and then, of course, as you disembark, you go from the front to the back. There was a great concern, though, for during our elementary routes where, you place your littles, your kindergartners, your first graders in the first front rows. If that's how, on a perfect day, you would hope that we could route it where they would still be in the front of the bus, but we weren't given the names of who was signing up for which days they were going. So ultimately, we just were going to go with what you just said, from the back of the bus to the front of the bus, and hopefully, if there is a need, pull over, possibly place one of the little people in the front of the bus, so the driver was closer to them. That was our biggest concern, though, in doing that.
Excellent. That's very interesting. Samuel, you guys are on this just essential kind of suspended animation, and by that I mean not a pejorative, but just kind of as perpetual standby as relates to going back to school. Are you using this time to reinforce driver training, both COVID related and maybe just some of the fundamentals around school bus safety?
So right now, unfortunately, no. The drivers have been, they're in the process of being reassigned for now to provide support to the schools directly since they're not doing any other routes. So when we get them back, definitely we're getting the training ready to go so that we can, train them on how to do using the foggers, the EMIS machines, and the PPEs and so forth. But just to speak a little more on that as well, we have masks for everyone to provide, and we've already created a guideline of what type of masks are acceptable, in regards to like having any kind of like graphics and stuff on the masks themselves that might be inappropriate. We tried the face masks. We for ours, our safety unit deemed them to be obstructing, in regards to safety. So we decided that we're not going to allow face masks for our bus drivers. Especially the view gets a little bit obstructed if you're doing your peripheral vision and so forth. So, but we're ready to go. We're putting those trainings together, but unfortunately we have not started them yet.
Interesting. Okay, so you're referencing the face shields being obstructive, not the face, or was it actually the face masks being obstructed of the
No,
view?
we are going to use the face masks, but the shields are obstructive to the,
Okay.
we've determined them to be, obstructive to view, and so we consider them a hazard for the driving, and we're not going to use it for our drivers.
And that's interesting as you kind of talk through that there, you're just seeing this, and there's no, like so much of this pandemic and the COVID, there doesn't seem to be a absolute right or wrong in terms of kind of some of these PPE policies. It's just, use PPE, obviously. There's a lot of gray area here, and it's different from city to city, county to county, state to state. So it's interesting to hear that some districts are going to, the private contractor we talked to was saying because of the heat and some of their drivers had pulmonary issues, that they were going only to the shields and not to the masks, while you guys are doing the opposite. So it's just, there's no wrong answer here outside of, obviously taking the precautions you need with some sort of PPE. Kane, the point you made earlier of this huge discrepancy of the breakdown of virtual versus in classroom by your, I think you said 91 campuses. I can't imagine the routing challenges. Can you talk about the challenges that presented and how you worked with your team to solve those? Because that seems just infinitely complex.
Well, I'm just blessed to have a amazing routing team here. We every year around April, we start looking at the next school year's routes and seeing what we can do to maximize efficiency and look at new neighborhoods, new areas of growth that we have to include, and of course, opening of new schools and rezoning, redistricting. So on top of all that, we, like I said, had to almost kind of initially guesstimate as to what the numbers were going to look like coming back for the fall. So right now we have the initial list of students that have requested bus transportation, and our team is just working diligently, looking at those load counts, balancing those loads. We've uploaded all those students into the map so we can see what our ridership numbers are on all of our routes that we've developed so far. And then, and we're still getting registrations in. The effective deadline to make a decision is August 25th for parents. So we're still getting numbers in as we speak. So right now we're just basically working, around the clock, trying to balance these loads out. Also understanding and knowing that, there will likely be students that will show up on the first day who have not registered to ride. So we have to be prepared for that scenario as well. And it's, it also revolves around just constant communication, having a seat at the table where the decisions are being made, to let them know and let them understand and stress the importance. Keep transportation involved throughout the process and keep us informed as to what's going on, because here's the challenges that we may face as we lead up to the school year. And, I was fortunate that when the first numbers started coming in, I was one of the first ones in the district to start receiving those numbers. So we could start working on it, because I shared the importance of having that data as quickly as possible.
I'm sorry, I'm still on mute. Kane, I was trying to respond and ask you if you had made any technology upgrades since the pandemic began to help you manage any of this.
Not necessarily. I mean, we're fortunate because we already have a student accountability system where our students swipe on and off the bus every day. What we have done is we have used internal mechanisms to be able to allow students to register for the bus online. We can feed the busing information into the parents' portal for their student, where they access the student grades and class schedules, whatnot. They can get their bus information there as well. So we've been able to maximize the use of our SIS for our parents. But one thing with technology and all of this is how our drivers have embraced it. That's been one key mechanism of communication to our drivers is email. We have a system where they can participate in online training where there are preloaded videos and we can upload our own videos, our own messages, and our drivers have really embraced it. I would say that's probably been the biggest plus for us with when you say, quote, new technology, is the fact that we were able to expand the existing technology we have and really get all of our bus drivers, bus attendants, technicians on board with it and using it actively.
Thank you for that. That's very interesting. A common theme has emerged over the course of this conversation, and I promise all the participants, all the attendees, that this was not intentional at all. But all of these speakers have spoken about making the investments up front in the technologies that are now being used in a whole new way with a whole new sense of urgency. Kane right there spoke about it with some of the learning tools that they're employing and some of the distance stuff with communicating via email to their drivers. One of my favorite sayings is, Noah built the ark before it started raining. This is obviously a different kind of flood. It's a flood of, a lot of illness and then the economic impact as well. And it's interesting to see how many of these districts have made these investments, built their own arcs that help them kind of float over this turbulence a little bit. You're never going to make it totally with technology. You still got to have that human touch and that effort, but technology can really help out. Michelle, wanted to go back to you. We'll start with Michelle, then go to Lisa. So from a small district to a big district. It's been in the news a lot that since we've all been locked up in our homes, not traveling or spending money or going to restaurants or hotels or sporting events, sadly, I think a lot of us are missing, and all these fun things, that a lot of these states and local municipalities are facing a budget crunch. How has that impacted you all? And if so, what are you all doing to navigate that? First, Michelle, and then over to Lisa.
I'm sorry, I had someone speaking to me. Could you repeat that? I apologize.
Yeah, of course. No, we're all very busy. I appreciate that. For the budget situation, states and counties, cities, they got less money because we're all sheltering in place. How does that equate to your budget at your district? If it's been diminished, how are you managing that in light of this, situation?
For us, I'm not sure how it is everywhere else, but our budget is based off of funding from the government, from the state that says yellow is rolling, and it is being heavily impacted with buses not on the road. Yesterday, the legislature was supposed to vote on how schools were going to be funded within our state, and we have not been told what that looks like yet. So we're pretty concerned about what that's going to look like for our future.
And Lisa, your thoughts? You're obviously a bigger district there in Minneapolis. What's the situation with your budget, and how are you all thinking about managing it?
Well, at the end of last year, we were pretty fortunate in terms of the state, and everything was funded as we ended this school year. This upcoming year, there's so much needed in the classroom that we, of course, are concerned about what transportation funding there'll be. We run roughly 40% of our routes in-house with our own drivers, and then we run 60% with outside contractors. And that outside contracting money is the money that, we're keeping a close eye on. And so I think until we get to a hybrid or full-in model, we're certainly very concerned of whether that money for those contractors will be there.
Interesting. As a percentage, maybe I missed that, I apologize. As a percentage, how much does that outside contractor do of your work?
60% of our routes are done by the outside contractors, and we'll certainly, have that as we start back in on a hybrid in a few months, but it's a couple months of gaps that they may or may not have funding to hold them over. Where at the end of last year, our state mandated that we pay our bus contractors even if they weren't running routes. That is not the case here as we start up in the fall.
Wow. And it seems across the country there's a lot of still uncertainty, both at the federal and the state level. I'm going to just go through real quick and ask each of you if your district, if you're aware at least, it doesn't mean it's 100% accurate because there may have been money that come in that you're not aware of, but starting with Michelle, then moving up, did your district receive and was your transportation department recipient of any CARES Act money, which was the federal money that came down, $13 billion of which was meant to go to schools?
I am not aware of that. I do not know.
Samuel, in Los Angeles, was CARES Act money at all on your radar?
That I'm not sure about. I don't have that information.
Okay, no problem. Kane, are you aware of that at all?
To my understanding, the CARES Act funding that came to Texas was held by our state agency and used to basically recoup the state agency for the funding that was continued to be provided to the districts during the spring closure.
Okay, interesting. And Lisa?
I would assume that we're similar to that. Certainly, most of our funding has come through the state, and I would imagine federal funding comes to them. I know also on our food distribution, there's been quite a bit of federal mandate that's affected it as well.
Excellent, very good. I ask because we've seen from a handful of our customers across the country that they have essentially come upon funds that they did not know they were going to have just a few days prior that arrived via the CARES Act, and they were looking for ways to upgrade their technology to keep their students safer, and we were able to satisfy some of those needs with some of our technologies. So I asked, just as an informal survey there, I think we can expect more of that money. Obviously, none of us are in a position to guess what's going to happen with the U.S. Congress nowadays, but there seems to be widespread understanding that the need is great and the $13 billion was largely insufficient. Okay, last question. Sanitization's been such a big deal in all of these webinars we've done. Could you simply, I'm going to go to each of you, if you're able to name the actual product you're using. I know different customers we talk to are using different products, and that seems to be something that's of a lot of interest to other drivers and other fleet managers. So Lisa, do you know the actual name of the cleaning product you're using? Lisa? Okay, over to Kane.
We're using a Quat 256 solution for the disinfecting of the buses. It's the same solution that we've used for years. They use in the campuses. So we're just going to be expanding that and using that in our electrostatic foggers.
Excellent. Samuel.
Hi. Yeah, so we have a disinfectant. I apologize. I'm trying to find it right now, but I don't know the name of it. But it was approved by our health and safety department. Let me see if I can pull that up.
Yeah, I know I didn't prepare that question for you. It just kind of struck my head as we're having this conversation. The specific one that we've gotten a lot of questions about that. If you can't find it, not a great deal. I think Kane provided some great information. Michelle, do you happen to know off the top of your head what the product you all are using is called?
Unfortunately, I don't know the name of it. I just know that our maintenance department and custodial department supplied the formula that we are using.
Excellent. And we've heard that from a lot of school districts, that they're trying to have a sense of uniformity between what's being used in the actual school and on the buses to prevent allergic reactions and stuff like that. Okay, haven't had too many questions come in thus far. Josh, have you seen any that I've missed? Josh?
No, I see all the same ones that you looked at.
Okay, excellent. Well, again, thank you to everyone for joining us. Just a reminder, this was brought to you by Synovia and our parent company, CalAmp, who has just recently brought out Bus Guardian, which is the tool for contact tracing and hygiene verification. If you're not sure how contact tracing works, it's essentially a product that I think a lot of you are familiar with called student ridership. At Synovia, we've just gone and modified our reporting that makes the student ridership turn into contact tracing, so you can very easily print reports to show which students rode which buses with other students and for how long and what parts of the day, which students rode a similar bus on a different route at a different time of day, and associates drivers those buses as well. So in an era of COVID-19 and potentially having to track down students who have potentially been impacted by being next to an ill student or an ill driver, we believe it's going to be a pretty powerful tool to help districts. And even on a good day, it's just going to help you do a better job of managing your routes in this complex era that we're in, to understand who's riding and who's not. And hygiene verification, what you see there on the screen, is simply the ability to have your hygiene be prompted on the tablet and then have the driver complete the checklist after it's done and be able to create detailed reports showing fleet-wide how much time and energy has been invested in hygiene. Obviously, a real pleasure. First of all, we have to thank Kane, Lisa, Michelle, and Samuel. Their information sharing is invaluable. The time they've spent to prepare for this and deliver it is greatly appreciated here at Synovia. And I'd like to close off with a reminder to everyone to please stay safe and healthy out there. There are literally hundreds of thousands, dare I say millions of students relying on all of you to stay safe, my son included. He rides on a bus with a Synovia unit on it that he will board tomorrow. So again, this was not an academic exercise for yours truly. Thank you all very much for coming out and spending this time with us. And I wish you all the very best.
Thanks for having us.
Brian.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
That's all the time that we have for today. But for anyone who asked a question that wasn't answered, Synovia Solutions will be following up via email to answer your questions individually. We hope that you all enjoyed today's webinar. I want to again thank Brian, Michelle, Sam, Kane, and Lisa for today's presentation. I also want to mention that an on-demand version of this webinar will be available on the School Bus Fleet website at schoolbusfleet.com/webinars. Thank you and have a great day.